Hi, I'm Aaron, and I'm your host for the second installment of Short Lessons in Native North American Theater. Today, my friends Aiden, Carly, Evan, Maya, and Marcello are going to tell you about the history of Native North American theater. Enjoy this tale of sorrow, revival, and creative liberation as we travel back in time to the 1960s through the 1990s, a period which some call the Native American Renaissance.
Oh, hi there. I'm Evan, and today we're going to be doing Slightly Intoxicated History with Marcello and Aiden. We're going to be talking about the Native American Renaissance, which occurred from the 1960s through the 1990s. Let's go check it out, guys. So our historians have been having a few drinks. Let's go check out what they're doing. Hey guys.
Hey, what's up?
What's up, you crazy historians? All right, so what is the Native American Renaissance?
Oh man, that's a complicated question. Term was basically coined by Kenneth Lincoln. It describes like this period in Native American history where there was an arts and theater revival that was spawned by this all these social justice issues that Native Americans faced in like the 60s and 70s.
So what kind of social changes were happening that time?
I'm glad you asked, dude. Now I can talk about my boy Richard Oakes and the occupation of Alcatraz in 1969. Our story starts with this guy named Richard Oakes. He's a student at SF State. He's from the Lakota Nation, and he's studying at SF State. Basically, when he gets to school, he's all excited. He's gonna be like, oh man, I'm gonna learn about the history surrounding like California and my people and all that. But that is not at all how it ends up turning out. He goes to history classes and he's like, hey, why the hell aren't we talking about any of my people? We're talking about all these white guys. We need to change this. And so he starts this like student organization that is dedicated to teaching Native histories. And it grows into this big organization that eventually merges with something called Indians of All Tribes. When he's studying his history, the history of Native Americans, this group sees this like treaty on the records between the Lakota Nation and the U.S. government called the Treaty of Fort Laramie. And what it says is that whenever the U.S. government abandons federal land, they like have to give it back to the native people, any unused land they have. And so they're like, hey, Alcatraz Penitentiary, the island was abandoned like 5 years ago, and there's nobody there now. That's government property. It's not being used. That's our property now. And so he gets together this group of like 14 students, and they're like, we're gonna go and we're gonna go to the island, and then it's our island. And so they get on a boat and they end up going to Alcatraz. And when they get there, the place is deserted except for like one security guard who's sitting there at the gate. And he sends out like this crazy message. He's all like, Mayday, Mayday. And they're like looking at him like, what the hell is going on? We're not here to like hurt you. This is our island. We want to be on our island. And like, he doesn't get hurt. It's a peaceful protest. And eventually, like, word gets out about this whole ordeal. And suddenly all these people are coming to the island. And they get like 400 people on the island. They got like a hospital. They got a school. They got like kitchens. They got their own radio station. It's great. But eventually this gets up the chain of command, right? It goes all the way to the top. And Richard Nixon gets a load of this, and oh man, Tricky Dick is not having any of it. He sees this whole thing and he's like, oh man, I'm gonna be having to deal with this Watergate stuff. I'm gonna be having to go like oppress some other people. Got all this CIA nonsense. We can't afford to have any of this. So he sticks the Coast Guard on the protesters, and they blockade the whole island. They go in, they cut all the power lines. They don't let any food or fresh water get to the island. And basically it's like they go medieval on this thing. It's like a siege. No food, no water, no electricity. And it's crazy. And it's like after like 2 years of this, eventually people have to start leaving the island because they don't got any food. You can't live. And by the time it's over and the Coast Guard actually storms the island with like, they got the big guns and everything, there's like still 14 people there. There's still people there, like 2 years, like they didn't have any food. But eventually they take it over, and the protest it doesn't accomplish its goal. They get kicked off the island, but it spawns this whole like movement. Like all these new things happen, right? There's like the Wounded Knee protests happen.
What's the Wounded Knee incident?
Oh, I'm not an expert on that. You're gonna have to talk to my boy Marcello over here.
I can help you with that. Inspired by the Alcatraz movement, the Wounded Knee incident occurred in South Dakota for the Pine Reservation, right? And this was symbolic because in 1890 there was 300 Lakota peoples that were murdered, men, women, and children, by the U.S. government when they attempted to take their property away from them. So this one happened in February 27, 1972 to May 8th, the same year. And they held their ground the longest time ever on U.S. soil for 71 days, half of that without food and power, and really sparked national attention to the injustices that they were facing, you know?
So how did these social changes influence Native American art and theater?
Hene Gigama in 1971, a couple years before Wounded Knee, Kaiwan descent, and basically he creates the Native American Theater Ensemble to show non-natives that First Peoples aren't just fiction and like what they really are and what they have to go through. A year later, he creates Body Indian in 1972, and the year following, he creates Concoon's Coyote. So in 1976, Spider Women Theater was created.
What is that, a superhero?
No, it's even better. It was founded by Muriel Miguel and her two sisters, and they invented like the concept of basically story weaving, where they mix traditional elements of native storytelling with current societal things that many go through during that time. And they became a worldwide phenomenon that basically inspired so many things. They created Women in Violence in 1976, same year that it first founded, and they created Blaristra Nabush in 1977. Both were featured in the WAC feminist museum movement later on, so clearly had an astounding impact.
So I've heard about a few of these Native American playwrights. Can you tell me a little bit about Thompson Highway?
So Thompson Highway is a Canadian playwright of Cree descent. He's most famous for his work on the Res Septology, that being in 86 the Res sisters, and in 89 Dry Lips Oughta Move to Kapuskasing. But the way he got to this point in his life is actually really interesting and related to what we were talking about earlier. As a kid, he was sent to the resident schools in Canada, where they like ripped him away from his family, and that stayed with him. And as an adult, he worked a lot with social justice issues, and he eventually founded the Native Earth Performing Arts Group that he used as a way to use his art to spread like social justice in the vein of the Alcatraz and Wounded Knee protests. The Res Septology in these works by Thompson Highway are sort of the pinnacle of like everything that happened in this period. You know, you got the social justice coming in, you've got the new ways to tell native stories, you got this huge burst of creativity and how the two can fuse, and it really represents the pinnacle of this period and sets an example going forward for native theater of all types.
So Hene Gigama, a couple years later, realizes in the 80s, like now things are really picking up. Native creativity is flowing, so he's like, you know what, I'm gonna create the first anthology and compile all my plays that I made that were really significant, 49, Body Indian, and Foghorn, and make the new Native American drama 3 plays, fitting since there are only 3 plays. And this kind of showed how far it has progressed from the 60s with they're having a first anthology, a first collection of plays that previously weren't available.
All right, well, that's all we have time for today. This is a good talk, guys. I hope we can do it again sometime.
Hope you enjoyed the second installment of Short Lessons in Native North American Theater. Please stay tuned for the next one.